Sound all right? All right, good deal. All right, and first off, this is Small Museum's Big Impact. We'd like to thank you for coming out. We'll try to keep things moving today. I know it's the 4 o'clock session. We've all had a long day. It's all dragging a little bit. We'll go through the coffee and the soda and the caffeine holds out for the next hour or so. My name is Ken Hickman. I'm the director of the Penn State All-Sports Museum in University Park, Pennsylvania, and I'm a member of the Small Museum Committee here at AASLH as well. And we have 3 wonderful speakers who are going to present for us today. But before we do that, we were just kind of curious to know what positions all of you have. If we could get a show of hands, who here is a director at their site? All right, who is a curator? Who is in education or programming? All right, development, administration, anything else? All right, now the $1,000,000 question. Who does a little bit of all that? We certainly do wear many, many hats here in the small museum world. I think let me move forward here. We'll introduce our panelists for today. First, we have Katz Burkhart, a self-described museum professional from the cornfields of Indiana. Despite being out in the cornfields now, she got her start just north of here in Washington, D.C. with the Supreme Court. Since 1993, she's worked in a variety of museums and history-related fields, and she is the only full-time staff person at the Carnegie Museum in Montgomery County. Next to her is Callie Hawkins. Callie has been in the education department for the National Park Service, the Yorktown Foundation, Colonial Williamsburg, and the National Building Museum. She is currently with the National Trust at President Lincoln's Cottage in Washington, D.C., and has spent many years developing a variety of educational and professional development programs. All the way at the end, we have Dr. Paul Katz. Paul has a degree in art history as well as multiple advanced degrees in anthropology. Paul, looking at your bio, you've more or less seen and done just about everything.
I'm an old guy. I've been around.
Paul has taught. Paul has worked in the field as a practicing archaeologist. Paul has also been the director at a variety of small museums and recently retired from the Texas Pharmacy Museum in Amarillo. He is also the past president of the Northwest Texas Museum Association, and like myself is a member of the SMC committee here with AASLH. So to get things rolling, actually one quick thing, we will have some time at the end for questions, so if we can hold questions until that point. I think the last part of this session we'd like to make a little interactive, hear about some projects that you've done that may have worked or not worked. You can certainly learn as many things from a project that didn't go the way you thought as you can from the ones that did particularly well. But with that being said, let me introduce Katz Burkhart.
Make sure I pull up the right one here. There we go. Okay, my name is Katz Burkhart. I work at, this is my museum, the Carnegie Museum of Montgomery County. We're in an old Carnegie Library, Indiana's first Carnegie Library. So I just wanted you to kind of get a visual for where we're working here. There we go. We see ourselves as a community museum, and we're in a community building. Again, that's the public library aspect. So we are library owned and operated. They own the building still, even though the new library moved in across the street. We are in a rural community. Population of the county is like 38,000 people. So when I said that in the cornfields of Indiana, I meant that. And we are a small museum. I'm the only full-time staff. I do have a part-time educator and another person who's working like 10 hours a week on collections. So there's not many of us working where we are. What I wanted to talk about was that we are collaborating with members of the community. We are a community-based museum. So we're not about one family or one guy or one topic. We are a museum for the people of Montgomery County. We happen to be in a historic structure, but we're not a museum about libraries or anything like that. So we try and collaborate with members of the community. We opened in 2007, and so I'm going to give you a little brief bit about what we've done since then. We've had to collaborate because we're a small museum. We have big ideas. Just because we're a small museum doesn't mean that we can't do big things, right? So we're famous for, wouldn't it be cool if we could do, name it, we try it, right? And we feel the need to change our exhibits and our programs often. The next part is we have community focus, but we have competition. There are 3 other history museums within a few blocks of us. And so they're all focused primarily on history. There's an old jail museum, there's the guy who wrote the famous book museum, and then there's the old governor's mansion, all within a few blocks. The 4th graders can walk from all 4 museums in one day, and they do. So that is why we have chosen to be the community focused and change our exhibits all the time. We are looking for repeat visitation and to be a community center. So this is not rocket science, but we are actively working on community collaboration, which sounds wonderful. Like, oh yeah, we'll all just play together, it'll be great, we'll do this thing together, it'll just be wonderful, everybody will come. Well, yes, but it's hard. Nothing really ever goes as planned, as usual. And trying to play nice in a small community can be fun, where you have to bite your tongue, step on your foot, not say anything bad about anybody else, but you have to get them to work with you, whether you want to work with them sometimes or not. So that's just my little 2 cents. This is how we do it. We ask, we play nice, even if it's like, okay, we're gonna do it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was we collaborated with the League of Women Voters, we have the largest League of Women Voters in the state of Indiana, just because we're a politically active kind of place. And they wanted to do the 90th anniversary of women's suffrage. So we have a political exhibit in the museum. We said, great, this will work well. Well, it didn't exactly go as planned. They were going to launch this big publication and a big opening, and it was going to be wonderful. Well, the publication wasn't ready. So they paid for they had already mailed out the invitations and everything, and they had paid for the postage and the invitations, so we were happy about that part. But we had to have the opening anyway. And so we opened the exhibit for them a month earlier than we would have, because they were sponsoring the event to launch this publication, which didn't actually happen. But we got a lot of great press and a lot of coverage, and they love us now because we worked with them, and even though the publication wasn't ready, we didn't say, all right, well fine, go away, we're not going to do this. We accommodated them, and it worked out well. So now they love us, and we are one of the focal points for their political, and the League of Women Voters is a bipartisan, nonpartisan sort of thing. So we're distributing government directories, information about the county, information about what's going on in the area. And so we're just a nice, neutral place for them, and they have camped out on our doorstep. They love to come have meetings at our museum, so that worked out really well. And what I have here is, what are the goals and do they line up? We are currently working with the League of Women Voters on an agriculture exhibit for next year in March of 2012. Well, they were doing an agriculture awareness study committee that's what they do, is they study things and then they do announcements. And we found out that we were each doing this thing. We were going to do an agriculture exhibit, they were going to do agriculture awareness. Well, our goals did line up really well, so that worked. They don't always line up quite that way. But there's usually some good to be taken from that. So we're collaborating with them. Hopefully they'll do the invitations and the postage again for the opening event for the agriculture exhibit, and it'll all go swimmingly. So that's just my example there. We worked with the Friends of Sugar Creek, which is our main body of water in Crawfordsville, Montgomery County. We had talked with them for some time, and they thought it would be kind of cool to maybe do something at the museum sometime in the near future. And then all of a sudden, a couple of them got together and decided that they were going to do an exhibit, and it was going to be ready, very, very quickly. And they also gave us a canoe and a kayak for people to climb in, and little kids just loved it. There's not a lot of public access to our waterways, even though it's all, I mean, the waterways are there, usually people are driving over them. So a lot of kids didn't have that chance to get in a canoe, to get into a boat. We had a lot of kids who weren't even sure how to get into a canoe, which, you know, that's one of our big things. We're like a canoeing place. It's not an easy place to get to necessarily. So we were just trying to be, again, community focused. They did the exhibit, they did the information, and we provided the artifacts. So we had a couple of models of some covered bridges. We had some items from an old mill that was on the river, or on the creek. They did all the information. It worked really well. It was like having extra guest curators that you didn't have to pay. Was they wrote all the text. They got the foam board. They mounted the pictures. We just put the items in the cases. And they brought in the canoe and the kayak. So that worked out really well. The Basketball Heritage Project, we are in Indiana, so you know we talk about basketball a lot because that's just what we do. And this is one of my good stories about being a community museum can be very messy. Things aren't always where they're supposed to be when we need them, and people back out, or they overpromise and underdeliver, or they show up with really amazing stuff the day before your exhibit opens. All of that is stuff we just have to deal with. The Basketball Heritage Project is an organization in Montgomery County. They have wonderful motives and goals, but they want to build a multi-million-dollar basketball museum in Crawfordsville, and they think that this will happen sometime in the near future. I wish them well, but I don't think it's going to happen. So when we decided we were going to do a basketball exhibit to commemorate the 100 years of basketball, Crawfordsville High School won the very first Indiana high school championship when Indiana, you know, basketball started tournament play. So we figured, okay, 100 years, we'll do a commemorative exhibit, that'll be great. Well, they got all mad because we didn't invite them personally. We had put stuff in the paper. If you would like to participate, if you would like to come, if you would like to give us items, you can loan them to us, you can donate them to us. We'd love to have your help, we'd love to have your information, we'd love to have your stuff. They were mad because we didn't invite them personally. So we invited them personally. Please come, that would be great. And so they did, and it worked out actually quite well. They had planned a whole big commemorative event because they don't have a physical space. So our event, or their event and our exhibit ended up tying in together quite well because we were all commemorating the same thing. So we gave them their personal invitation that they needed. We also partner with the schools. We have 3 school districts in our county, and we've partnered with art teachers, science teachers, history teachers, you name it. We are willing to partner with anybody because we just want to be that community resource where people will come in the door. So we've partnered with 2 different school districts, and they've done 2 different K-12 art shows at our museum. So we're just trying to be as open-minded as possible. We have a middle school curator program, and this is one of those things that also just kind of happened. We had a middle school science teacher who came into the library looking for some refresher materials because she had to teach science to summer school kids who did not pass their science standardized test. These kids were not in summer school because they wanted to be, they were in summer school because they had to be, and they were not the kind of kids who enjoy school. So we were trying to come up with she and I are friends, and we were trying to talk about what they could do, and this is about the summer before we opened the museum. Well, we came up with an idea that these kids, would do an exhibit for us on the history of electricity, because that was one of the things that they needed to learn about. And so we did this, and it became a series of exhibits. So we had middle school kids, and sometimes it's the advanced kids, and sometimes it's not. And either way, it doesn't matter. We've had school time, like they could come in school time for a couple of years, and then that had to stop because of all new education standards. They're not allowed to leave the school. So they had to come in afterwards, after school, to volunteer. We're like, great, nobody's gonna come. We were swamped with middle school children. They were like 17, we were expecting like 3 or 4 to come, we got 17 to come volunteer. And because we make them write the text and do the installation, put up cardboard bricks for this one. We had 6th graders do an exhibit on the human body, and it was basically like They each had to do an element in the human body. And they were doing this anyway for schoolwork. It was part of the curriculum that the teachers had already done. So all we did was mount it on a piece of foam board and hang it up in between the bathrooms, because, you know, that's where you learn about the human body. Well, when you're standing there waiting for somebody, yeah. And so all we did was hang up their homework in the museum. And they loved it. They just thought that was the best thing ever, and it's still up. And this is a few years ago. So now the kids are coming in as middle schoolers and high schoolers and be like, I did that. And they still feel that sense of ownership. The very first exhibit, again, with the electricity that we did was, these kids had not had a whole lot of breaks. We'll go with that. They were not the honors children. And our goal was for them to like learning. If they didn't like school, that was okay. They needed to enjoy learning. They needed to not hate school to go back in the fall. That was like the primary, that was the stated goal, to keep these kids just focused on something. So we did that. It worked really well. These kids got to meet the mayor at the exhibit opening. We had one kid who was quoted in the newspaper as saying that was the highlight of his life. And it honestly probably was. We are in a poor rural community for the most part, and a lot of these kids, especially these, the ones that we did the electricity exhibit with, did not have a lot of the opportunities that hopefully, hopefully other kids have. And literally he was quoted as saying it was the highlight of his life, and unfortunately he passed away at 19. So I think it was the highlight of his life. It's just one of those things. But we kept him out of trouble for 6 months. The probation officers were very happy. So here's a list of the exhibits that we've had that were done by middle school students. Electricity, geology, natural disasters, astronomy, local history. We've had multiple science teachers partner with us on this, and the natural disasters one was local natural disasters. So it was science of natural disasters, but local impact. So all the tornadoes that hit Montgomery County, they went through the local history research to find those. There's just a couple pictures. There's the kids getting ready. I'll just go through this really fast. We also partner with our local college. Wabash College is one of the few all-male institutions left in the country. So they're all boys. All of my museum interns have been boys, which is sort of funny. A lot of them, we've had a lot too. But we have Pi Day, which is March, started off March 14th, 3.14. So we had pie, we actually feed them pie, and then we have lasers and math and all that fun stuff. Brain Day, we have the psych department come in, the neuroscience department. And this is one of those things like, I don't have lasers, I don't have money for lasers, but they do. And so they bring it in for free, do this wonderful outreach. Same with the psych department. They bring in real brains, sheep brains, cow brains, all that kind of stuff. They do all the outreach. We just provide the marketing and the facility, and we talk to the teachers, that kind of thing. So you can see, we don't look like a small museum here. We look like we know how to do marketing and all that. So we've done Money Day, we've done Poetry Day, just talking with other professors, and now they're trying to one-up each other. So I had the chemistry department in there, the chemistry department chair in there with her son for Brain Day going, yeah, we need to do something here. And that's how it started with Money Day. The economics professor was at Pi Day going, yeah, we need to do something. And it's mentioned in their reviews at the college. Part of they are required to do outreach. So we are giving them a venue, an academic venue, where they can come, and we are that bridge in the community where the professors feel comfortable coming to us because we're a museum and we're an old library, so we have that feel where they're comfortable. But the kids and the family who are coming into the museum feel comfortable with us where they wouldn't feel comfortable going on campus. And so we're trying to be that community bridge. Again, like kids don't go to League of Women Voters events to learn about democracy and voting and why it's important to vote. They might go to the Friends of Sugar Creek meetings, but again, maybe not. But we're trying to be that middle partner. So there's Poetry Day. We had the entire softball team show up in uniform because they got extra credit from one of their English teachers coming to Poetry Day. That was kind of fun, and The Wabash guys were doing raps and rhymes and all sorts of different kinds of poetry. They did very classical poetry and modern poetry. We partner with the other local museums in our town. Again, I mentioned that they were all within blocks of us. So we share items, artifacts. We have a local heritage alliance where we all sit around and talk about our schedules and how we have no time and all that. It's just good to commiserate as well as share information. This has kind of paid off for us, and that we just did a deck of playing cards for our community. This was our big fundraiser that we did. So here's us, and here's Wabash College, and 2 other museums here. There's the covered bridge in town, the other museum, and then the CELMP power plant in Sugar Creek. Well, we've done exhibits with all those people. The Sugar Creek folks did Friends of Sugar Creek. The electricity folks did the electricity exhibit. We have forged partnerships with them over just the last few years. So I just thought it would be kind of fun, and I highly recommend going for that community-focused feel. And even our fundraiser has turned out to be community-focused, which is creating the deck of playing cards.
Did you make last year?
We just got them and started selling them, and they're selling like hotcakes, so I'm hoping. They came in last week, and we've already sold over 100 decks at $7 a piece. So we're happy about that. And all the cards are sponsored, so we were not out any money, which was beautiful. So and I met the people who do that at one of these conferences. So it's all one of those networking and sharing kind of things. But the whole point of this is community collaboration can help cause a big impact. So are we making a difference? I think so. I think we are. Do we have all the data to prove it? Not yet. This summer, we did a summer program, and we had all of the local caseworkers in town bring their kids, their caseloads. We started seeing one adult with like 5 kids in 1 week. I'm like, wait, those aren't your children. I mean, she kept going out and coming back with a new kid. Okay, are these all yours? You know, what's up? And we had multiple caseworkers coming in and bringing their entire caseload all summer long. The summer program, they had to come in 6 days and they got prizes each day. It's kind of like summer reading at the library. But they all finished. All of those kids who would have never been brought into a museum, their parents would have never brought them into a museum, but their caseworkers did. And they got that one-on-one time. They got to focus, which some of these kids are ADHD, so that's the big part, you know, can they focus? We've had the ability services folks, like the ones who run the group homes and teaching life skills, that kind of thing, come to our museum on a regular basis, those kinds of things. So I think we are making a difference. We're still trying to figure out how to collect the data and evaluate that. But the partnering with the community is what we're all about. So yes, the public benefits. We're part of the museum. The museum is part of the community discussion. So what's happening in the community is also reflected by what's happening in the museum, and then vice versa. And is it quantifiable and measurable? We think so. We're trying to figure all that out. But this is my last slide. These are some of my middle school students that we did the middle school curator program, and that is Governor Mitch Daniels. The kids were invited to go to the State House in Indianapolis to meet their legislators and to sort of do their presentation about this is what we did. We worked on this project, and there were 12 other schools from around the state invited to do the same thing. Well, Governor Mitch Daniels was there. He was not part of the program. He was not supposed to be part of the program, but he was there doing some talk, and they had him filmed in the State House because that makes a beautiful backdrop. Well, I threw my kids in front of him and basically jumped him and said, you have to meet these children. And he did, and he shook their hands and he talked to them. And this was from the governor's website. This is not my picture. This is from, indiana.gov. Because he's not the most loved by our educational facility. I don't know how much you know about Indiana politics, but the fact that he had a picture on there talking to students was pretty good PR for him. But these kids, they're 12 and they met the governor, and then he thought about running for president. They remember that. That is something that causes them, I don't know, bragging rights. They got on the school bus to go back home, and people are like, well, where were you? Oh, we were at the State House, we met the governor. It's just all cool. But we've given them that, I don't know, ownership, and just, how do you measure that? So that's one of our impacts. So that's me. And my information, we're all in the attendee list, all that fun stuff, so I don't have any handouts or anything. But I just wanted to show a story of a small museum being sort of a community bridge and our impact. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Kat. So we will continue on with Callie Hawkins.
All right, so we'll see how good Callie Hawkins is at all of this multitasking, which we all do, right? Oh, she is there we go. She's great. Good afternoon. It's nice to see such a big crowd. I was worried the 4 o'clock crowd, and then I don't think they could have made it any more difficult to find us. But that's fine. That's great. That's great. We're really excited to be here, and it's hard to follow all of the really great work that Kat and her museum are doing. But I did want to come from President Lincoln's Cottage to talk about this, and I'm particularly interested in what all of you guys are doing, and I can't wait to hear from you all afterwards. But President Lincoln's Cottage is a relatively new site. We've only been open for about 3.5 years. We're located in Washington, D.C., and it was opened by the National Trust for Historic Preservation after an 8-year restoration. And it's particularly significant because this is where President Lincoln lived when he wrote the Emancipation Proclamation. So the Lincoln family actually moved from the White House 3 miles up, kind of on a hill, to a high point in Washington, D.C. It was then part of the county of Washington, though now it's part of the city of Washington. So we're a unique historic house museum in that our focus is not on things, but on ideas. So when you think about what Lincoln was doing when he lived there, that's sort of our unique approach. And we do that in a conversational style of interpretation, where we really want people to talk. We're facilitators and not just interpreters. So we really hope to engage people in conversations while they're at President Lincoln's Cottage. And we use a multimedia approach to do this. Now, is anybody else in here from Washington, D.C.? So you know that when you bring up this word community and you're from Washington, all of these things start going through your head, right? What is community? What is your community in Washington, D.C.? And it's a bunch of different things. So one of the things that I wanted to focus on today is not just, is to sort of expand community in some ways, because our community are not only our neighbors, they're the off-the-mall tourists, they're DC metro area folks, they're government employees, the list could go on and on and on. But they're also our colleagues at other museums and historic sites, of which, Washington is not wanting for museums or historic sites, right? So I started at President Lincoln's Cottage about 2.5 years ago, and I kid you not, as soon as I logged in, I don't even think I had a password yet, and there were tons and tons and tons of emails in my inbox. But one particular email really was intriguing to me, and it was an email from the education director at Ford's Theater Society. Now, Ford's Theater has clearly, been there for ages and ages and ages. Very, well-established historic site. They not only have a national park side, but they also have a private side as well. And so I was really excited to get this email from their education director, who said, I've been working with some other historic sites, some smaller historic sites, on a series of teacher workshops, and I'm wondering, we're having a meeting on Friday, I'm wondering if you want to come. And this was like Thursday, first day on the job. So I said, sure, I'll go check it out, I'll see what they're working on. Staffing, budget, program space, and all of these things to see how we could all be real, true, equal partners and not feel like the smaller sites were, again, as I said, being sort of gobbled up by the larger site. So those are some of the things that I wanted to take a look at, sort of our process of doing that. first we took a look at budget. Is this a shock? Look at that. You know, Ford's Theater, Ford's Theater Society, I should say, because we were specifically working with the private side of Ford's Theater. But Ford's Theater Society had enough money to put into this series of teacher programs that was my entire education budget. They could put into this one programmatic area. The rest of us had to then go back to our budgets and say, okay, how much money can we realistically put into a series of teacher programs? Now, let me also say that when you look at this list of sites, you know, if I'm being 100% honest, these are also, not only are they my colleagues at other sites, they're our competition, right? You know, they were very literally our competition. But one of the things that I think really clicked in that first meeting was that we recognized that together, the four of us were better than any of us could be individually. And it just worked. So we started looking at, again, things like this budget. So the budget is probably not that surprising. You probably also won't be surprised when you take a look at staffing. So the Ford's Theater Society education staff has about, I think they have at least 4 full-time people in education. And for the rest of us, for the other 3 sites, there's 1 person in the education departments. And I guess for Frederick Douglass National Historic Site, they have a ranger that's devoted to education, but that ranger is also working on a bunch of other different things as well. So they had maybe 3/4 of a staff person devoted to education. So that's probably not a shock. The next slide might be a little surprising to you, though. You can have all of the great ideas in the world for really great programs, but if you don't have the place to do them, they can't become a reality. And we recognize that Tudor Place, which is in Georgetown, in Washington, a neighborhood in Washington, and President Lincoln's Cottage, which is located, again, just a little bit outside the downtown area of Washington. We have a lot of land. And both of us had a tremendous amount of space that we could devote to doing these kinds of programs. So while Ford's, with their budget and with their staffing, they could draw on lots of money, lots of corporate sponsors to help with the program. They were also able to dedicate a staff member to do all of the administrative work. So they did, you know, if we had a teacher event, they would coordinate and make all of the lists, the contact lists, and then they shared them with everyone else. And President Lincoln's Cottage and Tudor Place, we were able to host evenings for educators because we had the space. We were also able to host, as part of our Civil War Washington Teacher Fellows program, which I'll talk about in just a little bit, we were able to host a welcome dinner. And then Tudor Place was able to give them space to work on their end of the week projects because we had that physical space right there on site. Now, if we hadn't been able to match other things up, the staffing, the budget, and the program space, all of those things are important. But we had to sort of fundamentally agree on our approach. And that had to match up. So all of these, you know, I realize that these are a lot of different pieces to the puzzle, and for us it just happened to work. But we took a look at our different sites. Because while it was important to us that they match up, we also wanted to be able to offer teachers through a week-long teacher summer program, we wanted to offer them a well-rounded, varied view of Civil War Washington. And we were able to do that, just the 4 of us, by looking at Ford's Theater. They approach things with performance and through performance, and they are a national park site, as is Frederick Douglass. So that meant that they had grant funding that they could draw on. That meant that they had, with Ford's Theater, they had corporate sponsors too because of their private side. But when you go to President Lincoln's Cottage, we had the larger buildings. We had a relationship with the National Trust for Historic Preservation, for example. So we had this parent company that also gave us grant funding that we could draw on. So all of that kind of stuff was important to look at as well, as was site content. And this again was important to show a well-rounded view. President Lincoln's Cottage focuses on Lincoln's presidency and his private life, while Ford's Theater focuses on Lincoln's assassination and his lasting legacy. We were able to show the African American and sort of the Southern perspective in Georgetown at Tudor Place, and then more focus on the African American and the abolitionist movement at Frederick Douglass National Historic Site. So what we really did is connect 4 sites in 4 very different places across Washington, D.C., and help connect those to teachers, both nationally and local teachers. And we'll get into more of that in just a moment. We also wanted, while we wanted different styles of teaching, again, that mission, that sort of those core values had to be the same. And at Ford's Theater, they focused on oral interpretation and speeches specifically. So it was a real in-depth study of Lincoln's speeches. At Frederick Douglass, they were then able to compare those to Douglass's speeches and further talk about performance. While we focus on role-playing and use a lot of technology at President Lincoln's Cottage, and Tudor Place has that object-based approach to interpretation. So we're really hitting a lot of different things in just 4 sites. This partnership created 2-week-long professional development programs. 1 week is specifically for DC teachers. And that was talking about community. That was one way that we could reach a major part of our community. We all had as parts of our educational missions to reach out to DC public schools. But how many trips do you think DC public schools get? If they get, this is another one of those times you could say they might get a half a trip a year, right? And if the 4 of us were in competition for that half a trip, how well would any of us have done? Not very well at all, and we recognized that. So we all wanted to devote 1 week solely to DC public schools. The second week is for a national audience. And I will say when we open that up to a national audience, guess who fills it up? Virginia and Maryland teachers. So we have really the DC metro area teacher week, and we have some, we typically have, we save half of the slots for folks who are from a little further away. I referenced these educator evenings. We have twice a year, we hold evenings for educators where we invite DC public schools, public charter schools, and metro area teachers to come. We have a wine and cheese reception. We get the wine and cheese, I think, from like Costco, and we open up one of our sites. We all set up tables, have our program materials for people to take away, and we get 100 teachers every time we do one of these things. If I were to do that alone at President Lincoln's Cottage, number one, I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford the wine and cheese, and I might get 20, 30 teachers. But by doing it together, I like to call us the Walmart of Civil War Washington. We're one-stop shopping. You can come to one place. And I have to say the other brilliant thing is that if somebody calls me, and through the course of a conversation, a teacher, through the course of a conversation, I find out that they actually don't want the program at President Lincoln's Cottage, but they want it at Ford's Theater, you know what? I'll connect them to Ford's Theater. Because we know each other's programs so well, there's a real camaraderie, so it works. The partnership also opens us up to work on other things. We have just started working with the DC government on the Civil War sesquicentennial programming for DC, for the city, which has been huge, and it's been a lot of fun to work on that. I like to joke and also say that, the first year or so, we were really sort of dating, and then by year 2, we moved in together, and now we really got married last summer. We signed agreements and we signed all of this kind of stuff to make sure that we held on to this partnership. And you know, it can be challenging, but we all really like each other, and the impact that we're able to have by working together is again far more than anything we could do as individuals. We measure impact by the resources that we're able to send teachers out into their classrooms with. Each of the 4 sites really works hard all through the year to develop new resources, new pre- and post-visit lessons for these teachers to take into their classrooms. And the reason I use that as a measure of the impact that we're able to have, you know, through our programs, we serve about 50 teachers a summer. And if you think about those 50 teachers who teach 30 students a year for 30 years, it's a tremendous reach, and it's a tremendous impact that we're able to have on that audience. We also develop a learning community. You know, I think that sometimes teachers, especially in a place like Washington, get into a habit of they go to the same places every year. Ford's Theater might be one of those places that a teacher goes every year, but I can assure you President Lincoln's Cottage, Frederick Douglass National Historic Site, and Tudor Place, we're not. But what we've done is we've helped sort of connect these teachers with all of us. And I don't know how many times I've been able to work with the educators at Ford's Theater, at Frederick Douglass, to, let's say a school in Virginia has 100 kids and they don't want to send them all to the same place at the same time, and we couldn't handle that. We'll flip-flop them. And we work all of that out. Because and teachers, I think, really like knowing that they can make one phone call and get their whole day planned. That's really nice for teachers. Back to the resources, we're human resources. We can help connect people all over the city if they're looking to work on Civil War Washington stuff. And we can go out to their schools and talk to them about specific areas if they can't make it to our individual sites. The professional network, I have to say, first and foremost, has been one of the greatest opportunities I've ever had as a museum professional. And I joke with them, a lot of us are here this week, and I joke because I miss them. We work together, 2 or 3 weeks for the summer, and I miss them when I don't see them quite as often. Though we do have regular meetings, which is nice. And I put increase in numbers at the bottom because I do think that is a measure of impact, but that's not our primary goal just for increasing numbers' sake. We think that we have a lot to offer, and if school program numbers increase as a result, that's fantastic, but we also know that the schools in the area face a lot of challenges that we may never be able to overcome. But it's giving the teachers the resources they need to take it out and take it back to their classroom. Maintaining, I think, these successful partnerships, it was really important to us to identify who was going to do what and who was going to pay for what and how that was going to happen. And I think we've done a really good job of doing that. The individual sites pay for costs that they incur for their sites' programs, and we try to split the rest as best we can. I, this past year, was able to apply for a grant, an internal grant through the National Trust for Historic Preservation that basically covered our 2 weeks during the summer, which was fantastic. I was also able to call on our relationship with Historic Hotels of America, because they were a subsidiary company of the National Trust, and they provided housing at the Willard Hotel. If you've ever heard of the Willard, for the national teachers, we are not going to be able, I know that word that those teachers stayed at the Willard spread like wildfire, so I shudder to think what our registration will look like for the national group. But they didn't offer it, they couldn't offer it for free, but they offered it at such a significant rate that we were able to afford it for the teachers. And again, we have regular meetings throughout the year, which selfishly, we like to see each other, we enjoy each other's company, but we're also able to stay up with what the other sites are doing so that if a teacher does call and they are looking for another site, we know what's going on. One of the things, and I was interested to see the number of directors in the room, because I am the educator at our site. We have about 6 full-time staff members. And I have to say that none of this would have been possible without the full support of our director, who was there also, reminding me of things to look out for and things to, ways that we could get involved. But I had her entire support throughout, and that's made a tremendous difference in being able to commit to participating in these kinds of things. Allowing for growth is also really important, because I'll admit it, the first year I was involved, we had a hard time filling the 50 slots, especially the 25 that were allocated for DC. But I think there's one teacher, and I know exactly who she is. I think she told every teacher she knows in the DC public school system, and we have to turn people away now for every single session that we offer. Now, one of the things that, in full disclosure, one of the things that really works about our partnership is the relationship and the dynamic that we do all have. One of the challenges we have faced, and I haven't told anybody, we haven't said this outside of this room, but one of the challenges we faced is how to grow, but keep that dynamic that we have. That's what works. So that's a real challenge. For the 4th year, the reason I say we have jumped right in and we are all married is because we're offering a 3rd session this year. We're going to try it. We've had to be real honest with each other about what our sites could do realistically with staffing, budget, program space, and all of those things we took a look at. But I think that we're hopeful that at least that we've come up with a way that we can keep that dynamic and also grow the program. We've talked about these others. The last important thing, and checking the egos at the door. That's important. And I think a lot of times what we find with partnerships, it can be a difficult thing to do. You really want to work with a particular group, but you find that they're difficult to work with, or you're constantly having to stroke someone else's ego and tell them, yes, you're the big site, you've got the money, and but that is one of the things that has worked about our program, is that there was no room for that. We didn't have that much space, right? You saw it on the pie chart. But it's worked to our benefit to do those kinds of things, and sometimes we'll remind each other, and we'll sort of call each other out if a problem comes up. But those have been very few and far between, and again, it's what's come of this has been a really rewarding experience for me. But I also think that we're able to provide, especially those DC public school teachers who are really thirsty for these kinds of programs. I think we're able to give them a very well-rounded experience in Civil War Washington.
Thank you very much, Katz. So we'll wrap things up with Dr. Paul Katz.
Kat talked about the impact of a small museum in and on the community. And Callie talked about the impact of a small museum on a constituency, in her case, teachers. What I'm going to talk about is the impact of a small museum on the individual, on a single person. Which seems a little presumptuous, but I'll let you be the judge. My particular tale is not very tall, but a lot of tall tales are coming out of Texas these days. and I just wanted to get your attention. The Texas Pharmacy Museum is part of the Texas Tech School of Pharmacy. It's physically located in the basement of the school on the Amarillo, Texas campus. And actually, I should reverse these pictures and put the museum underneath the building. We are in the basement. There are 3,000 square feet of exhibit space spread over 4 galleries. Takes up half the basement. Collection is about 12,000 items, a permanent collection, and which cover primarily a century, from 1860 to 1960. And the focus is on the history of pharmacy practice. The museum opened in 1998. It's only 13, 14 years old. And for all of those 13 years, 14 years next month, we have been participating in a history festival at an Amarillo middle school. Go Panthers. The festival, which is on the 3rd Saturday in October, it's coming up, sprawls inside and outside of the school. There are costumed interpreters. There are demonstrations ranging from medieval sword play through pioneer soap making to a Korean War MASH unit that's set up by those folks. But there are a lot of hands-on activities: weaving, jewelry making, corn grinding, atlatl throwing, both prehistoric and historic. And these rather fuzzy pictures were taken out of a newspaper article. But there's a lot of things for the visitors to do, and most of them are students. The attendance is about 1,200 students, parents, and their students in middle school. But it is a public event. It's not a school event. The TPM, Texas Pharmacy Museum, presence at the History Festival has 2 components. Because this always occurs in October, which is American Pharmacist Month, it's an opportunity for us to talk about the profession of pharmacy, to reaffirm the relationship between the visitors and one of their healthcare providers, the pharmacist, whether it's an independent or a chain pharmacist, doesn't really matter. And visitors are encouraged to take a list and log form. It's a very nice piece of paper. One side allows you to list the medications that you take. The other side is where you keep track of what you take on a daily basis. You'd be surprised, maybe you wouldn't be surprised, at how many people take a lot of medication and don't really keep track of it. So this is something that we can do at this venue. But most of the effort and activity is devoted to interactivity, not just handing out a form. The visitors, who are mostly students, make a pill using the tools and techniques that are rarely seen outside of a pharmacy history museum. And here are some of them. This is called the pill machine, pill rolling machine, pill tiles, mortars and pestles, that kind of thing. But they're all used. The volunteers from our side are second-year students in the Doctor of Pharmacy program at Texas Tech. And interestingly, the tools and techniques which they are demonstrating and helping the visitors with are as foreign and exotic to them as they are to the students. Pharmacy is a very modern, very fast-moving profession. And the reason why the museum is so successful in the School of Pharmacy is these people don't know what the hell's going on with this stuff. So it's wonderful for them to actually use it. The way it works is that you mix up some dry ingredients on the pill tile, according to a recipe. You thicken it with some agent, glycerin or cornstarch or something like that, just like making gravy. You change its consistency to something approximating clay or Play-Doh. And then you roll out on the pill machine a length of this stuff, and you run this little rolling pin thing over it and cut it into equal pieces. This is supposed to control the dosage. Then, on the palm of your hand, you take one of these equal pieces and you roll it into a sphere. And that's great fun. First, they're pulling the thing back and forth, cutting into the pieces after rolling out, and then they're making the pill. Now, here's your vocabulary lesson for the day, since we're talking education. A tablet is a little piece of medicine that's compressed by machine. You can't make it by hand. A pill is a handmade piece of medicine. Now, you can all go away, and if you hear the word pill, wrong, tablet, all right? Okay, 11 years, I learned something. So what you end up with is a handmade sphere or ball of raw medicine. Well, the medicine ball has to be covered with something to make it palatable. This is the proverbial sugar-coated pill. What we use are sweet tarts, which are ground up in the mortar and pestle, and that's great fun. You just beat the crap out of this stuff until it pulverizes. You get a nice final powder, which you pour onto the pill tile, and then you take your little ball of medicine and you roll it around until it's covered and ready to take. So, it's great fun, but what is the big impact of this? Specialized museums, because of their focus on one topic, can conceivably influence the direction of a visitor's life. A visitor who goes to a fire museum may conceivably find that they want to become a fireman. They may go to a sports museum and find that this is something they always wanted to do. In the case of pharmacy, what we have found over the course of 14 years is that we're actually getting students into the graduate pharmacy program. Students who are going to become pharmacists who remember making a pill at this history fair. That's how, at least in the case of a specialized museum, you can have an impact on the individual which may conceivably change or orient the direction of their life. Yes, it may be pretentious, may be preposterous, but we actually have evidence of that. Before I finish, I just want to have a footnote here. When we were planning this, one of you asked, "Oh, I have one of these pill machines in my collection. How does it work? Can I use it?" Well, yeah, you can. They're tough little things. You can actually use it from your collection and not do any damage to it. There's no moving parts. All you need to do is clean it. If you want to make a pill, either yourself or demonstration, you can use Play-Doh. It has several advantages. The consistency of Play-Doh is exactly the consistency of this roll of medicine. It rolls out nicely, it cuts up nicely, and you can make colored pills. You can make yellow ones and blue ones and green ones, which is cool. But you don't want to eat it. That's the problem. You can even roll it in powdered sugar. But what we found when we were using Play-Doh is you have to physically restrain your visitors from popping this Play-Doh, sugar-coated Play-Doh pill into their mouths. So, if you do it, use a Tootsie Roll. Just, buy them by the gazillion at Sam's and at Costco, and it's good consistency, and you can complete the whole.
Also, we are very interested in hearing is some of the experiences that you've had out in the field, both good and bad. As I said before, we can often learn as much from our mistakes as from our successes. So, does anyone have any questions or something they'd like to share?
I was wondering if anyone has worked with an educators consortium that involves different types of museums, not just history museums, but that would include science museums and art museums as well.
I haven't had, well, when I was at the National Building Museum, we did partners with other history museums, but they were, the National Building Museum is on the building arts, but they still had a history focus, so we partnered on history-related programs, but I haven't had that opportunity.
I worked at a museum where they had that, but I wasn't the educator. And that was in Detroit, and it was one of those museum campuses. So the museums were owned and operated by different organizations, but they were all within a few blocks of each other. There was a science museum, an African American museum, a history museum, an art museum, and a library.
I think it's a great idea, though.
And they loved it in Detroit, but I couldn't tell you how it all worked.
Just to address her question, in Amarillo, I live over where Paul is, and we have a Quarter Horse Museum, Art History Museum, the Art Museum, and the Discovery Center, and we work together on it's called Parents Night Out. Really, we call it Nights Out at the museums, and so twice a year and a month, everybody takes a Friday, and then everybody does their own special program. But then the parents can enroll their kids, take a night off, and they still get all the educational programming of those 4 areas.
That's fun.
That is.
Quick question for you. Working with a larger museum, is there any advice you have trying to collaborate with a larger museum? We worked with one in the past, and they tended to start picking certain nights that they were going to do things without speaking to us.
Yeah.
And that was one of the issues that really fell apart for us to collaborate with.
You know, I think it's got to be the right one too. And I mean, I feel like a little bad in some ways that we had one meeting and we sort of all clicked and we all knew that it was the right fit. And I know that other people have more difficult times with that. I would have, I think laying it all out up front, this is what we expect. Because I think sometimes, and I'll admit, I went into to that first meeting thinking, I'll do what they tell me and we'll get out of it what we can get out of it. But I realized that they also, they looked at me and said, what are your expectations? And I thought, I get to have these? I mean, it was such a great experience. So I think it's maybe going in there with this is what we need to get out of it. And to just being real honest with each other, and if it doesn't feel right, or at the first moment that it doesn't feel right, maybe talking about it and just having an open dialogue about those kinds of things. But I think it does take the right fit, which is not a lot of help. I mean, it's not a lot of.
Yeah, it probably sounds a little cliche, but the communication piece really is key. I mean, if that dialogue's not there, it's going to be very difficult. For both sides. Yeah. Anybody else? And once, we can have Stacy come up here and start forcing folks.
Well then, I'm going to follow up on that question actually, because you said there was something about this sort of personality clicking. Do you have plans, or do you feel like you can put anything in place that will allow this partnership to continue when all 4 of you aren't in those positions?
Yeah, and we are doing that. In a lot of ways, I think that the past 3 years, because we've gotten to really know each other, this 4th year now that we're doing 3 weeks, those 2 weeks I'm away from the office, and so to fit 2 weeks where I'm totally out in the field, in Washington. And then to have a vacation, and that's a lot of time out of the office. And so I think these past couple of years have been good to prepare us. We know what's going on the days that come before. So the way the program works is that the group is at each of the 4 sites on a different day. And we always felt like it was necessary to have, all of us at all of the sites so that we would know how to go back. So we're going to start using interns. One from maybe, our hope is that we're going to have an intern from each site who can be with the group all week long, so that each site is maybe represented, but not by the curators or the directors of education. And that we would, work with the group maybe 2 of the 5 days and one of the evening programs. Because these programs are literally morning, noon, and night. And we, spend a lot of time together. So we're going to start alternating so that one of the education directors is with the group on every day, but we're going to alternate who that is. And we're going to see how it works. We do know that it's selfishly we like that time that we spend together. We all feed off of each other very, very well. But we also do know each other, and we know the approaches of the other sites so that we can do that perhaps without being physically present every time. But we also want that consistency with the teachers, because that's where they start to buy in, and that's where they start to really see us as resources. So it's a challenge, and it's one that we'll probably have to try different things for a while until we find what really works for all of us.
I'm curious about your cost business and how it works financially. Are each of your 4 components contributing funding? Mm-hmm. Are you taking, and how are you doing that? And are you taking in any funds from others, and how is that working since you're 4 different entities or 4 different organizations? So we do charge a fee for the national group of teachers. It's free for DC public and public charter school teachers. But for the national group and the metro area group, we do charge a fee. Those fees they offset the cost of housing and airfare. And what's left, we split equally among the 4 of us, if there's any left. Because there are 4, and this is what we run into where I work, because there are different, I'll use the term governing organizations. I was going to say government entities, but I work for one municipal government. Someone else works for another municipal government. If we do paid programming, admission to my site is free. Admission to their site is $3. Now, how do you administer those funds? Who holds the checkbook? That's a great question. And it's typically Ford's Theater because they have the larger staff and the resources to do all of that. And then at the end of the, and I shudder to say anything, can you turn the camera off? So I'm joking. But we basically submit invoices at the end of the summer to Ford's Theater for anything, because they're sort of the repository. And then we submit invoices to them for educational supplies or stuff like that. But for each day, so if I feed the teachers breakfast and lunch, that comes out of my budget. When Tutor Place on Fridays feeds them breakfast or lunch, because that's a joint day where we're all there and they're doing program development, we split it 4 ways. When Tutor Place does the tour of Tutor Place, and they feed them breakfast and lunch, that comes out of their budget. But the welcome dinner and the closing dinner on Friday, we share jointly. Ford's Theater has the credit card, they put it on the card, and we'll... Well, you truly did need a signed agreement then. Yes. Yeah, we had to do signed agreements because and we recognize that when one of us leaves our respective sites, it sort of goes up for grabs again. At least our part in it. So that's why I sort of say it really is like a marriage of sorts, and it's a scary thing to get involved in, but it works so well. How do you advertise it to the teachers? Is it through their extended continuing
That is
education
the
center?
one success we've had with DC Public Schools, especially, is that they have a PD calendar, and we get on their PD calendar, their professional development calendar, and word of mouth has also been huge. But we're also starting to see that we're getting into the schools. So these evenings for educators, we already have the date set for next summer, and we're handing this stuff out. And we have extensive lists. I think we have a list of something like 5,000 contacts in the DC public school system. And we just send them emails until they ask us not
The
to.
district are allowed to do that? Because like in our district, they have to read everything before they would ever send it out.
In a lot of ways, that is one of the best things about DCPS. They've got a lot of problems to focus on, and their teachers' names and their email addresses are up on their websites.
and they're very, they're very big.
We have to get approval from the superintendent of each school district when we send out emails to all the teachers. They've all approved it, it's all been good, but we have to go through that approval process.
Yeah, and I find that DC is generally grateful that you're wanting to provide this for their teachers, and that you don't have to do the work to get the information out there. So.
Is that how you did your evenings for educators too? Just through email?
And we all keep lists of the schools that we have that come each year, and we compile those lists, and we don't typically share those lists. So if a teacher signs up on something with President Lincoln's Cottage's name and they are signing up to receive President Lincoln's Cottage newsletter, I won't send that email to Ford's Theater. If Ford's Theater has something they want me to send out to our teacher contacts, I'm happy to do that.
All right, well, our time is just about up here. If we could ask everyone to please take a moment, fill out the orange session evaluation that were on the seats when you came in. Yeah. Thank you very much for coming out today.